to Mr. Falana. I don't know if you can hear me now. Can you hear me now, Mr. Falana?
Perfectly well.
Oh, great. It's good to hear you. Great. So the first question that I asked earlier about the election, I wanted to know your own assessment of the presidential election and National Assembly election of the 25th of February.
Well, the presidential and National Assembly elections were marked by insecurity in many places, late arrival of materials, violence and thuggery, manipulation of the results. INEC has admitted that there were logistics and technological challenges. That is the way INEC has put it. So nobody is saying that the election was perfectly conducted. There are challenges. What we may therefore have to address, and that is the issue that will come up before the courts, is the degree of crisis that occurred with respect to the election. INEC will have to go back to the drawing table and fine-tune its strategies, because INEC said, with respect on a review of the Presidential National Assembly election, that we painstakingly made plans to conduct the election. However, the implementation had some challenges. For me, I think that is admission on the part of INEC that all did not go down well.
Okay, so...
And what we may have to do, therefore, learning from the experience. I mean, for instance, INEC said there were problems that arose that were not anticipated. And of course, the members of the political class have likely shown that they are not really prepared to allow democracy to survive in our country. And that is why, for me, it is not enough to review the last election without putting on trial those who have been arrested for various electoral malpractices, electoral malfeasance, manipulation of results, illegal possession of arms and ammunition, shooting recklessly to scare voters, and those who were caught with money with a view to inducing voters. So it's not sufficient to say, oh, we have learned our lessons, we now want to have the governorship and House of Assembly elections conducted on the 18th of March. No, that will not be enough, because if you do not arraign those who have been arrested for electoral offenses, you are simply telling them, come again. So we must make an example of those who have been arrested. I mean, happily, and I think other police formations will have to follow the good example of the Lagos State Police Command. The Commissioner of Police, Mr. Ido Omonhua, did promise when we had the meeting a couple of weeks ago that all those who have been arrested will be charged before the appropriate courts. Those who committed electoral offenses have had their files submitted to the INEC. And I think some were caught with arms and ammunition have been arraigned in the courts in Lagos. I am aware that in Port Harcourt, a legislator caught with about $498,000 have been charged before the court, but it's a wrong court. I mean, a wrong charge. But it is a wrong charge. Instead of charging him with inducement of voters, a plan to induce voters, I think he's been charged with money laundering. In Kano, a legislator has been taken to court for culpable homicide. But I think magically, a couple of days later, he emerged in the Federal High Court that has no jurisdiction on culpable homicide. And he was said to have been granted bail. Why the spirit of the two people that were killed are demanding justice. The two people that were killed are crying for justice in their graves. So, as far as I'm concerned, please, the authorities, INEC, will have to work with the police and other security agencies to put on trial those who have been arraigned for forcing the country to ridicule.
Mr. Falana.
That should be done before Friday.
All right.
So that those who are going to participate in the election will know that it's no longer business as usual.
All right. So if you look at it, it's quite a journey in our electoral process and in our democratic journey in this country. Is there any positives that we can take out of that election? Did we move at all in our electoral journey? Is there any success or progress that has been made so far, taking a lesson, a cue from the experience of the 25th of February?
Yes, for sure. There are some positive developments that were recorded. For instance, like the gentleman was saying earlier, the myth of structure, these political structures has been destroyed. Secondly, I mean, whereby people have shown that we are the structure. The people are the structure ultimately. Secondly, young people have also shown this time around that we are going to determine the future of our country. Thirdly, you no longer have to be a money bag to contest election in Nigeria. Another development is that whereas the National Assembly, the Senate chambers, has been converted to a resting home for former governors, this time around, many of the governors lost their seats. I mean, they lost in the elections, and so they won't be able to go to the National Assembly. The other development is that sitting governors sitting governors and a sitting president could not deliver, could not win their states for their political parties. So, in spite of the challenges, a number of positive developments have been recorded by our country. And of course, I think the most significant is the use of bimodal voter, systems, the accreditation through BVAS, it has improved the accreditation of voters. The failure of INEC to upload the results in their central server is a major challenge. But I hope that will not be repeated when you are going to have the governorship and House of Assembly elections.
Because I was just going to ask you for what INEC needs to, or the nation generally, on every stakeholders that will be part of that election of Saturday, what we need to work towards in, assuring that the election of the governorship and the State House of Assembly and the supplementary election for the National Assembly is way better than what we saw on the 25th of February. If there are a few things that you can tell INEC tonight, or security agencies, or any of the stakeholders, what would this be?
No, Sean, please, can you come again?
So I was just going to, you were mentioning a few things that we cannot afford to go into the next election with, and I was going to follow up on that to say, can you give highlights? You met with the Commissioner of Police in Lagos State. A few of the infractions that you saw in the last election, a few of the positives that you said can be taken away from the last election. But going into the governorship election, it's another kettle of fish altogether. What should Nigerians be hoping for?
Yep.
What should INEC be doing to ensure that the governorship election of Saturday, the 18th of March, is near perfect?
Well, in the case of Lagos, we've met with the Commissioner of Police. It was a very good meeting to assure all voters in Lagos State that people are going to exercise their democratic right without any harassment or intimidation. Happily, the Inspector General of Police has already directed police commands in other states in the country to hold similar meetings with community leaders, the human rights community, the youths and faith-based organizations, so that we can have an election devoid of intimidation or harassment. We have also met with the REC, the Resident Electoral Commissioner in Lagos State, and he has assured us that the delay in the supply of electoral materials in certain areas on February 25th will not be repeated. I'm also in touch with the chairman of the INEC, Professor Yakubu Mahmoud, Yakubu, I beg your pardon, who has also assured me that there will be a lot of improvement, in the forthcoming election. But for me, Nigerians have to be vigilant. Voters have to insist on their rights. Voters have to be furnished with the telephone numbers of security officers, the police, state security service officials, and so on and so forth, so that if there is any embarrassing situation, they can make calls and ensure that problems are attended to. So, but vigilance is very important on the part of voters.
Yeah. So, Mr. Falana,
also want to warn.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you...
Some political leaders who took advantage of their official positions.
All right.
To harass voters and electoral officers.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you quickly before we go on our first break. There were questions that have been raised in respect of the section 60, 61, 62, 63, 64 of the electoral law, which is one of the infusion into the election laws, which says that the INEC has the powers, the statutory powers, to review an election result that is deemed to have been declared under duress, or that's deemed to have been declared and found out later on that such election results are fraudulent. And there are those who have accused INEC of lack of substantial compliance with that provision. Let me get your view on that based on what the scenarios that played out and brought to the notice of INEC.
I am aware, or rather I have confirmed, that in the case of Kano State, where a legislator was alleged to have put a gun, in the hand of the returning officer, whereby he made the declaration and pronounced the legislator the winner of an election under duress. The returning officer is a professor. He sent a strongly worded petition to the INEC, and in the circumstance, INEC had no choice but to cancel the election, even though it had a return had been made, which was found to be fraudulent. I am not sure that that had been done in other cases, because it's now past 7 days after the election. So whoever didn't have his own petition treated in like manner will have to go to the tribunal.
I mean, this was one of the issues that was raised at the National Coalition Center when a few of the political parties came up and said they have issues with the coalition and the announcement of the result, and they wanted INEC to take a pause. And, they alluded to these provisions of the review of the result. Do you see the relevance of that law in that respect?
Well, from the information at my disposal, INEC had a lot of complaints, and I was informed that if they have to address each and every one of them, there was going to be a crisis. And so INEC, therefore, has asked all those new complaints to head for the tribunals, where those who are alleged to have manipulated the results of the election will have to be sued together with INEC.
Mr. Femi Falana, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, has been speaking with us on the program tonight, assessing the election of 25th of February 2023 and looking ahead to the governorship election of 18th of March 2023. Let's get back to the conversation with Mr. Falana. Mr. Falana, looking ahead of the next Saturday election, you, in a statement, said that you're worried about the voter apathy that we saw. But in our past election, it's been a trend. How can we change that?
Well, we're expecting some improvement this time around because young people registered to vote, many of them for the first time in their lives. But this time around, because of the excruciating monetary policy of the central bank, whereby many people who had registered in their home states could not travel, could not leave their places of work. In my office, not less than 3 lawyers informed me that they couldn't vote because they registered outside Lagos and they haven't transferred, you know, their votes. I mean, voting in Lagos. And you have many were also challenged. You also had a situation where quite a number of undergraduates were disenfranchised because they had registered in their campuses, but NUC, for reasons best known to it, gave an illegal order that every undergraduate be asked to go home. The NUC has no such powers, you know, because closing of schools, closure of universities is the business of the Senate and Council, I mean, Senate in particular, of every university. But, you know, the country is operating on the basis of impunity. So you have other factors that reduce the turnout of voters. Whereas in 2019 it was 35%, this time around it went down to 27%. And since the central bank has refused to comply with the judgment of the Supreme Court, it's going to be difficult to expect any improvement next Saturday.
So if you look at what we're seeing presently, INEC has promised that the IRF portal will work. But although the IPAC on the program yesterday said there's smell a rat, and presidential election results are not being uploaded as of the time that it was promised, but other results in the National Assembly were being uploaded on the same portal which INEC has said has some glitches. In that respect, based on the promises, you said you've spoken to the INEC chairman. What are your views? Do you believe? Do you trust? Can we take the words of INEC for what it is right now, going into the next Saturday election?
Well, INEC has postponed the governorship and House of Assembly election by 1 week. So we will not expect any complaint this time around. You've taken a date, I mean a week, to reconfigure the system. You've also taken a day to put your house in order. In all respects. So Nigerians will not want to accept any excuse this time around. And I do hope that INEC will not make the mistake of, you know, not uploading the results. But my honest view, having regards to the enormous cost spent on our elections, I do hope that at the end of the review, we are going to have our election conducted the same day. In other words, instead of giving me 3 ballot papers to tick 1 of 5, so that we can save a lot of money. Thank you.
All right. The president of the Nigerian Bar Association today, Mr. Mikel has called on the president to immediately direct the compliance with the terms of the orders made by the Supreme Court in his judgment delivered on the 3rd of March in respect of the Naira redesign policy. And there has been accusation that there is blatant disregard to the judgment of the highest court in the land. But the president today, in a statement, has come to say, released by Mr. Garba Shehu, said, look, there is no intent of impunity on the side of the presidency, and there's no being any instruction given to the Attorney General of the Federation and the CBN governor to disregard the orders and the judgment of the Supreme Court of the land. I mean, based on the response of the presidency and the issue of the scarcity of the Naira, which in part he said was responsible for the voter apathy that we see, the president has said there is no any kind of impunity on our own side. What are your views on this, Mr. Falana?
With profound respect to Mr. Garba Shehu, there are a lot of discordant notes oozing out of the seat of power. The Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Mr. Abubakar Salami, SAN, did say, when he was asked why the government hadn't complied with the order, that he is not suited. He doesn't have the competence to advise on monetary policies. On the part of the central bank governor, banks were asked not to disburse old Naira notes without the mandate of the central bank. The lawyer, the senior counsel, a respected lawyer that represented the federal government in the Supreme Court case, Chief Kanu Agabi, SAN, did assure the nation, as soon as the judgment was delivered, that the federal government was going to comply with the terms of the decision of the Supreme Court. Curiously, this federal government has not complied with the judgment of the Supreme Court. The central bank has not been asked to make a statement, allowing the banks to comply with the judgment of the Supreme Court. Again, as I said before now, this can happen in a banana republic. You cannot filibuster. You cannot dance around the judgment of the Supreme Court. Otherwise, you are simply saying you do not want the rule of law to operate in your country. And it's very sad. I do hope that this outgoing government will comply with the judgment in totality. But for the president of the NBA, it's good that he has rather come out, even though rather belatedly. But I'm going to appeal to him, since he has said that the NBA was going to collaborate with INEC to prosecute electoral offenders. They have to put the machinery in place now, because electoral offenders, some of them have been arrested. We need to have them put on trial now. Since INEC said, oh, we do not have facilities, for prosecuting electoral offenders, and good enough, the Nigerian Bar Association has offered to them. We did it in 2011 successfully when Professor Atahiru Jega was INEC chairman. Now that Professor Mahmoud has also said, we're ready to collaborate with the NBA. Both organizations, INEC and NBA, should assemble a team of lawyers to fight charges in the appropriate courts, so that those who are convicted will serve as, conviction of such people will serve as a deterrent to other potential electoral offenders. I believe they can do it. Our good friend Mike Igini did it successfully in Akwa Ibom, whereby, based on insistence, a couple of lecturers, were jailed for manipulating election results in favor of a particular candidate. So I think the judgment, coming back to the judgment of the Supreme Court, it must be obeyed. And the earlier the better, so that those who may want to travel to exercise their democratic right will have access to their own legitimate money.
All right. Mr. Falana, let's wrap up this manner. The president in that statement has said it is an established fact that the president is an absolute respecter of judicial process and the authority of the court. He has done nothing in the last 8 years or so to act in any way to obstruct the administration of justice because of lack of confidence in the administration of justice or otherwise interfere or corrupt the court, and there is no reason whatsoever that he should do so now when he's getting ready to leave office. Those are the words coming from the presidency, that the president has said he has no history of disobeying court orders. I'd like you to anchor on that note and give us your final thought.
The statement does not reflect the situation in the country. I have found cases where we got court orders for the release of detainees, Ezaki and his wife, Shore and others. Not only did the government ignore the orders, the Attorney General came out publicly to say, we ain't going to comply with those orders. Colonel Sambo Dasuki was detained for 4 years. The High Court, the FCT High Court, and the ECOWAS Court ordered this relief. The government ignored the orders until I now insisted, in the case of Shore, that you either release this guy or we take the Attorney General for contempt. And the DGSS says it was at that stage the government now released him and released Colonel Sambo Dasuki. In the case of Ezaki and his wife, when the government could no longer justify their detention, the governor of Kaduna State, Malam Nasir El-Rufai, decided to file a frivolous charge of a culpable homicide against them. Again, we got them freed. So we have such cases, very many. And to confirm my statement, in an address presented to the Nigerian Bar Association on August 26, 2018, President Muhammadu Buhari said publicly, my government will not obey certain orders in the interest of national security. I recall that occasion. My reaction was that national security is part of the rule of law operating in our country. So if by virtue of section 45 of the Constitution, you want to disregard the court order, you have to go back to the court to say, for this reason, for that reason, my lord, can you please vary your order in the interest of national security? But this government, and this was noted in the judgment of the Supreme Court, that this government has a history of disobeying court orders. Now that the government is on its way out, I do hope that the government will turn a new leaf.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Femi Falana, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Indeed, thank you so much for your thought there.